Hello, Jeff Zwerink, and welcome to Give and Take, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific ideas and how they affirm the truth of the Christian faith. Today, we're joined by President and founder of Reasons to Believe, Hugh Ross, and we are going to look at the importance of Earth's magnetic field. Hugh, it's good to have you here today.
Oh, thank you.
So, kind of give us a little bit of background. Why does the Earth have a magnetic field? We obviously get cool things like aurora displays, and so we know it has one, but how does it have one?
Well, Earth has a unique interior. I mean, it's a small rocky planet with a solid inner core and a big liquid core that goes around it. And the stuff is made up of iron and cobalt and nickel predominantly. And those are metals that are easily magnetized. And so the circulating liquid core above the inner core, which is a heat producer, a lot of radiometric material is there. So there's a flow of heat out. You've got the rotation of the Earth, and so this sets up a magnetic field. And the Earth has had a strong magnetic field literally for about 3.5 billion years.
So we basically, the Earth's kind of an electromagnet, if you will. So it's
Yes.
got a moving charges, you move charges around, you produce a magnetic field, and that's basically what's going on. So kind of describe the history of Earth's magnetic field. How long have we had has it just been that way all along, or is it something that's changed over time?
Now, the field has changed. I mean, we know that the Earth's had a strong magnetic field for at least the last 3.5, maybe 4 billion years. But for the first few billion years, it was a multipole field.
Okay, so explain what that means. So.
I mean, instead of having like a typical magnet, you got a north pole and a south pole. A multipole is where you got a whole bunch of poles. And
so presumably that works because it's more electromagnetic instead of a nice straightforward current. You've got random things, and so that gives the multipole.
But it does give you a weaker field, and it gives you a much more variable field. But given that the first 3 billion years of life history on Earth was microbial, they're able to handle lesser magnetic protection than, say, plants and animals.
Well, okay, so let's dig into that a little bit because, to first order, the magnetic field really doesn't affect life on Earth. I mean, humans don't need a magnetic field to live by and large. There are probably some bacteria or some things that rely on the magnetic field. So why is the magnetic field important for life on Earth if life doesn't exactly need it?
Well, you're right. A dipole field really helps animals in navigating, like turtles and birds. Will use the Earth's magnetic field to figure out the direction they need to go. And that doesn't work with a multipole, but it works beautifully with a dipole. But the real reason why we need a strong magnetic field, it prevents us from losing our water. Without that magnetic field, you're going to get gradual loss of water to interplanetary space, and eventually the Earth becomes too dry.
So explain how that works, because it seems like gravity is the dominant influence on what keeps the water, and the magnetic field doesn't affect the gravity.
The magnetic field protects you from ionizing radiation. And it's the ionizing radiation that's going to take those air molecules in the atmosphere and break them apart into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen escapes, the oxygen's left, but that means you've got less water.
Okay, fair enough. So you've got this radiation out in space, which is pretty prevalent. The atmosphere and the magnetic field protects the atmosphere from being exposed to the radiation. The radiation would break up the water molecules, hydrogen escapes to space, and you get no water. Okay.
Yeah, for a rocky planet, you're going to need a strong magnetic field to keep the water from dissipating to outer space.
Okay.
And then for life like us, you need that magnetic field to protect you from the deadly radiation that's coming in from the sun and the cosmic area. So thanks to that magnetosphere around the Earth, a lot of the deadly radiation gets guided away from us.
Okay, so you said that the field has been largely around, but kind of changes from dipolar to multipolar or multipolar to dipolar. Presumably it's strengthened and weakened over time. So how has that affected life here on Earth?
I wrote a blog on this, Jeff, making the point that a new research study demonstrates it's not how weak the magnetic field can become, because Earth's magnetic field can go from a little stronger where it is now down to about 10% of where it is now.
Over what time scales will that happen?
That'll happen over time scales of thousands to millions of years. It is random. It's not a precise period. But what this research paper was pointing out It's how long you stay at, say, a 5 to 10 to 20% level. If you're only there for a relatively short period of time, by short we mean just a few thousand years or less,
Okay.
it's not going to be a problem for advanced life. But if it stays weak for millions of years, now you've got a big problem. And what they're pointing out is Earth's magnetic field throughout the past 3.8 billion years, it's been varying, but the times when it's down really low are relatively short, except during the period when we only have microbes. But microbes are much more able to handle radiation exposure than, say, plants and animals are.
So I was reading through your blog, and one of the things I noticed in there is that they mentioned the magnetic field seemed to have changed to this dipolar kind of the field we have today. Roughly, could have been as recently as like 565 million years ago, which corresponds to the advent of multicellular life. Is there a connection there?
There could be. I mean, the date when it went from being purely multipolar to dipolar, it's somewhere between, say, 500 million years ago and 1.5 billion years ago. And I think the date is more likely to be around 1 billion. That's being sorted out. But what is interesting, we know for certain that the window in which we had animal life on the planet, the last 543 million years or the last 575 million years, throughout that entire era, we've had a dipole field, with one critical exception. That dipole field sometimes reverses. You get a flip of that dipolar field, and when it flips, it becomes temporarily multipolar. But it could be just hundreds of years.
So presumably it weakens, goes through multipolar, kind of flips, comes out the other side. But those are a fairly short time scale compared to how long
Those are short time scales. It's predominantly dipolar, but when it's reversing, you get a brief moment where it's multipolar. But even when it's multipolar, you still got a magnetic field that's like 10 to 50% of where it is today, which gives you adequate protection.
So last kind of quick question. How would you use this kind of research to engage people in a conversation about the gospel?
Well, it's a good question. I would kind of go the fine-tuning route. That what's really extraordinary is we got this rocky planet with a really strong, stable magnetic field. And what does it take to make that happen? And what you realize is it takes a planet like Earth that has a superabundance of uranium and thorium, cobalt, nickel, and iron. And when you look at what we see in the universe for those components, it basically tells you that we got 630 times as much thorium as what you'd expect for other rocky planets, 340 times as much uranium. We're also super endowed with this iron, and moreover, we got a high sulfur content.
So we're a pretty unique planet as
we're
far
a unique
it seems
planet,
like we're unique.
And it's like, okay, it looks like somebody there really went to a lot of effort to fine-tune us in a very remarkably unique way so that we human beings can exist here, and it poses the why question. Why would the creator of the universe go to all this expense and effort to give us these fine-tuned characteristics so that billions of us can live here for a brief period of time? Then I would also segue where we see the greatest fine-tuning evidence is when we put what we observe about the universe and the Earth in the context of what does it take for billions of us to be redeemed from our sin and evil. And I think that gives you a good
ties
bridge
it directly into the gospel.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh. I appreciate your comments. When we do look at Earth, it is just remarkable how conducive Earth is to life. And one of the features that it has that makes it conducive to life is this stable, long-standing magnetic field. I'd encourage you to go check out Hugh's blog. Go to reasons.org, and the blog is titled Life and Magnetic Field Variations. And it will give you a bunch of information and resources to help equip you to use this important research to share the most important message of the gospel.